I have so much trash. Thankfully, tomorrow's trash day. Garbage day? What do people say? Probably look insane filming myself taking out the trash. Is there a way to tip your garbage man? As someone who waited tables for a long time, I feel like they deserve a tip. What do you call garbage men? Are they trash men? I don't know what the right term is. I think they're called waste collectors. Because you don't want to say that they're garbage men. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to be breaking down 5 tips to get the most out of your camera that I wish someone had taught me when I started doing photography a long time ago. I just kind of jumped in, I did everything on auto for a long time, and you get great pictures. I mean, the camera knows what it's doing most of the time, but to get the absolute most out of it, there are just really easy things that you can do that'll make all your photos a lot better. So the first 3 tips are all going to be related to one thing, and that's shooting in manual. You always want to shoot manual. I don't care what situation you're in. It's just gonna help you lock in the correct settings for what you want to capture. The first thing you want to look at when you're shooting in manual is your shutter speed. Your shutter speed is how long the shutter stays open to let light in. And it's weird, the lower it is, the longer it's open. The higher it is, the shorter it's open, and that's because it works well. I'm not going to explain a bunch of details because I like the mentality of this is how it works being the most important thing rather than this is why it works. And how it works is all you really need to know in this situation. If you want to understand why, I'm sure there's tons of other videos out there that'll explain why. There's tons of material out there that I use to learn. But this is just going to help you with the basics. All you need to know, just do this. So with shutter speed, when you hold the camera in your hands are going to shake a little bit. No matter what, I don't care who you are, if you're a doctor or anything, your hands are going to shake, and if your shutter speed is too low, then the shutter will be open long enough for the photo to pick up on your shakiness, and that'll cause some blur in your photo. If you're going to hold the camera in your hands, you're going to want to shoot with at least a 60 or higher shutter speed. 60 is like the very, you might be able to get away with it. I usually shoot in 160 just to be safe. On a Canon camera, to change your shutter speed, it's a knob that's on the top right here. So you'll see as I turn it to the right, I'm turning it higher and the image is getting darker. That's because the shutter speed is going faster. That's going to let less light in. The more I turn it to the left, the brighter the image gets. Now with everything in manual mode, it's going to be a give and a take for how much light you're going to get. The next thing I'm going to talk about is aperture, which is the intensity of the light. There's what's called an aperture ring inside the camera, and how wide it's open determines also how much light is coming in. With the aperture number, the lower it gets, the wider it's open, and the more light you'll get. The important thing to understand about aperture is that the lower the number gets, the smaller the depth of field will become. And the easiest way to explain depth of field is the amount of area of the image that will be in focus. So right now this is at an aperture of 2.8. Zoom out, zoom in. You see that right now only the O and the N on the lens cap are really in focus. And as we move the focus ring, you'll see the depth of field is incredibly small. I mean, those are about 6 inches apart and I don't know, 2 inches wide. So we're getting less than half an inch that's actually in focus at a time. So if you're doing a situation where you're shooting people, multiple people, you need them all to be in focus, you can bring up the aperture with this knob right here. And the higher you bring it up, the darker it's gonna get. And that's because you're letting in less light, which is also increasing your depth of field. So let's adjust our shutter so that we can get more light. So you can see Now pretty much the whole lens cap is in focus. And as we shift, more and more is in focus. If you're going to leave the shutter open for a really long time to capture a lot of light, like say you want to capture cars moving by and you want those photos where it's a string of light that goes all the way across the road, then you're going to need to set your aperture based on how long your shutter is going to be open to let in the right amount of light so that's not overexposed or underexposed. The last thing on shooting in manual mode is the ISO. And the ISO just represents the sensitivity of the sensor in this case, if you're using a DSLR. The thing about ISO is the higher the number gets, the more light that you can collect, but also the more grainy the image becomes. And I actually have my ISO set to lock at 6400 because anything above 6400 I found in this, the 5D, that it just becomes unusable. It becomes so grainy that it just doesn't look good. I wouldn't want to use it. And the button for ISO is on the top, and then you use the scroll wheel on the top to adjust it. I always try and stay within 100 to 400 ISO. You're gonna get very minimal grain in that range. But then again, it's all a give and take. So you have to make sure that the ISO and shutter speed and aperture are all working together to get the right kind of lighting for the situation. A lot of people would probably start with ISO last, and a lot of people leave it on automatic. I don't ever do that unless I know for a fact that I'm moving, say in a video situation, I'm moving from a dark area to a light area and I'm not going to be able to adjust it during the move. If you leave ISO on auto, it'll automatically adjust once you change scenes, and that makes that a lot easier. The next tip is one that I didn't learn for a long time, and I don't know why. Maybe I should have read the manual or something, but using the light meter is very important, and it's a great tool for getting your settings right from the get-go rather than playing around with them, taking multiple photos, going in video mode, adjusting there. You can just use the light meter. You can get things pretty much lined up. Start with what you find important. So set the aperture based on what you need your focus on. Set the shutter to 160 to start. Set the ISO to 100 or 400 to start. So on the camera you can see on the bottom here is the light meter. Right now it's reading to the left of 0, so it's -1, which means that according to the camera it's underexposed. So what we can do is shift our shutter speed right now, and now our light meter is telling us that that is perfect. We're getting the right amount of light from everything, and that's what we should be shooting on. Now obviously you can adjust this to whatever mood you're trying to set. Overexposed, if you want things underexposed, it's all up to you. Another simple thing that you can do is change the contrast and saturation in your camera before you ever have to go to editing it. There's a couple different reasons for this. I always put it in high contrast, high saturation if I know it's a series of photos that I don't want to have to mess around with a lot, or it's video that I don't want to have to color correct a lot. I want it to look good straight out of the camera and it's ready to go. If you're going to be doing a lot of editing, color correcting, you're going to want to shoot it as flat as possible, and that has some advantages with it. So say you're shooting a super sunny day. The more flat you get, the more detail you'll get out of the super blown out sky and the super dark shadows on the ground. Right now I'm shooting in my own user-defined style set, which is based on the Cine style. So with this you can see that my contrast is set to -4, my saturation is set to -2. I found that in a camera like the 5D, that's the best settings for getting a flat image that still has enough quality in it to be usable. If you're going to be shooting and you want it to be great straight out of camera, I've got another setup that's +2 and +1, and that way you get really nice rich images, a lot more contrast. The brights are brighter, the darks are darker, and the red in the table is brighter. So those are just some really simple things you can do to make your life a whole lot easier when you're using your camera for video or photo work. And like I said, those are just things that I wish someone had told me when I first started. So hopefully you learned something, hopefully it helps you out, hopefully it makes things easier for you. See all this crap I set up just to do this? Those guys who do tutorials all the time Holy crap, man.